Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me, and for Louis for dragging me over from Oahu to do this talk about something that actually got me into ethnobotany. Geez, how many years ago? I was hoping that Louis wouldn't say how long we've known each other, but I'll give it away that it was probably 30 years ago when I was working in Silicon Valley in a very different part of my life that I got interested in foraging, and this sent me down the path of ethnobotany as my introduction to switching from Silicon Valley to working with something much more alive and close to my heart. So I saw a lot of you kind of shrink in fear when I dragged in a bunch of this halikoa and laukahi and false ava and dug up a bunch of other weeds from the garden. But this is just as a way to show you that they can not just be disastrous for the ecosystem, but we can reap some benefits from them. And if we learn how to use these weeds, these aliens, that I'm going to talk about, we can help get rid of them faster if we introduce them to people as something that they can harvest themselves, and hopefully get rid of more of them and make more room for the natives that we care so much about. So I'm going to do a mini striptease for you today and show you how we're going to get through the invasive indigo that was used to make this shirt, down through the canoe plants like the noni and the ava and the kalo, down to the heart of the matter, which is the natives, all the way down at the bottom of this shirt here. They only squeezed a few natives in here. I had to search for them in the mirror. The uhaloa is an actual native on there. Most of these are canoe plants. I can't read it backwards so well from here, so maybe you guys can point out the natives that are on here. So the whole point is how we can make use of the aliens to get rid of them faster. This is a little bit how I got into my interest in botany and having a love of the biodiversity of all of life out there. So there's thought to be now about 8.7 million species of all living organisms out there. Most of them seem to be animals. Maybe that's just because we've discovered them more, because they're more in our face and macroscopic. I think over time we'll probably discover that there's a lot more fungi and protists and bacteria out there. So only about 300,000 of those are plants. And we have about 14,000 of those species in Hawaii at this moment, including natives, canoe plants, and invasives. So that's a pretty good chunk of the world's flora. That's about 5% as I calculated it. So I'm betting that most of you in here love biodiversity and having many different things in your garden and in the surrounding areas. But for some people, those living in Honolulu might not be so aware of the importance of biodiversity. So I have to hammer it into their brains and say, why do we need this stuff? For resiliency, for food, medicine, ideas if we're thinking about biomimicry and borrowing ideas of how nature has tackled really difficult engineering problems. Ecosystem services, it's often couched as like cleaning water and such. Being, this kind of with resiliency, being ready for climate change, which seems pretty inevitable at this point. So, the plants that are growing here now might not grow here for many more decades, so we have to get used to some other plants coming in and taking their place. There'll always probably be something growing anywhere you are, but unless it's scorched desert, Death Valley or something. So this is one reason to love all this diversity of plants and other species. And I'm sure most of you know what ethnobotany is already. I consider it the study of both past and present plants that people use for food, medicine, clothing, construction, ceremony, ornamentation. all of these things. And this is a picture from me working in the Peruvian Amazon, but I got my start doing urban ethnobotany, studying with Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine and Dominican and European herbalists in New York City. So that was my fun introduction in the other type of jungle where I grew up in New York City, going to all these herbalists and finding out what plants that they use both locally and what they brought in from their home countries to use, mostly as medicine in that case. So as Louis said, my PhD was focused mostly on medicinal plants for diabetes and other autoimmune diseases, as well as parasitic diseases like malaria and sleeping sickness and Chagas. And then I came here to do a postdoc at UH, where I was working in Thailand and Laos more on food plants, which is really my original interest in botany and ethnobotany. So how did I get into foraging? Why should we bother foraging? I think you get a lot of things for free, not only free lunch or free dinner in this case, as you saw me out there gathering some plants we can eat later. You get free medicine. When I get sick or any of my friends or loved ones get sick, instead of running to Long's, I just say, oh, what's growing out there? Maybe something out there will treat diabetes or a cold. Or during COVID, I found, at the suggestion of another forager, a plant that you probably all have in your backyard called stonebreaker herb, or Phyllanthus neruri. It's all over Oahu, at least. Have you seen that here?
I'm not sure what it is.
You know that one? It looks like a legume, but it's not. It's a little low-growing weed, and it's called stonebreaker because it helps treat kidney stones, but it's also an amazing cure for COVID and other coronaviruses. So I tell all my friends when they get sick, you go out in your backyard and harvest some of that.
Definitely present on this island.
Sorry?
Present on this island.
Okay, definitely seen it here.
How
Yeah,
do you prepare?
just make a tea out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And some people find it bitter. I have an overactive bitter gene, so I find most things bitter that other people can handle. Like I don't drink any coffee or beer or wine because those are all too bitter for me. But stonebreaker, I don't mind. However, my girlfriend is the opposite. She loves all those other things, but she hates the stonebreaker when I force her to take it when she's getting sick. So yeah, we can put all these plants to use to heal what ails us. You also get a free gym membership out of the deal instead of driving your car to the supermarket. Instead, you're going out in the forest or walking around your garden, getting some exercise. So you probably feel much better. So that's one reason that I consider foraging being free antidepressants. But they also, in the last few years, found a bacteria in soil that indirectly produces dopamine in our brains. So if any of you feel good working in the garden, not just because you're doing something good for the landscape, but you immediately feel happy, there might be a biological explanation for that.
What about working in bare feet all the time?
Yeah, that might induce it even faster. You also get a free nutrition consultant because all these plants have never been cultivated, so they haven't been, well, except that the Halicoa definitely has, and the Hoja Santa, but most of these haven't been necessarily cultivated for food. They maybe have been cultivated as an ornamental, and that's why they were brought here. But they're usually much more nutrient-packed than cultivated plants because they haven't been bred to be full of water or good for shipping and hardy, ignoring all the nutrition content. So I often find on my foraging walks that I do on Oahu that people say, oh, it doesn't seem like we're collecting much plant matter. But I'm like, you're going to feel satisfied after having only a few bites of these nutrient-dense plants. And they actually found that they compared in a study last year foraging society in Tanzania with agrarian society in Nepal and a supermarket foraging society in California, and they compared their gut microbiome diversity. And I think the Not that surprisingly, the Tanzanian Foraging Society had 3 times as much gut microbiome diversity as the California supermarket foragers, but also they had twice as much biodiversity as the Agrarian Society in Nepal. So just having a much wider range of plants that you're eating every day, you're going to get a much better and healthier gut microbiome from that. And we might put the Hawaii Invasive Species Council out of business if we spread the word. You tell 2 friends and they tell 2 friends, because if we're all pulling these invasive plants out, hopefully we'll reduce their workload, because right now they have kind of a infinite amount of work to do. Does anyone here work with HISC? Yeah? Okay. That's why you've seen Stonebreaker. So I don't mean to put you out of a job, or you, Jim, for pulling all the weeds out from the garden. And again, this is giving us great resiliency, because probably some of these weeds, even if we try to have a big impact on them and eat them out of existence, they're still going to exist in 20 years. And they'll probably be, since they're so good at growing in new places, they will probably be here even after climate change. So if we come to learn them and use them for good reasons, we'll be more resilient, especially when the food shipments stop coming from the mainland.
Is that because they leave some portion of a root rhizome when you pull them?
Sorry?
Is that because they leave some portion of a root rhizome when you pull them?
Is that why they'll
keep coming back?
Often, yeah. That I can talk a little bit about like good harvesting practices and making sure you don't leave behind any propagules of the plants when you take them out, because that is a risk of harvesting, especially something like Haulicoa.
If you can get it out.
Yeah. I was trying to be very careful when I carried it from Louis' car through the garden not to drop any seeds on the ground. Make your jobs more difficult.
It's not from our house.
Yeah. They've gotten rid of it.
But you're lucky.
All these other weeds in front are from your house. How are we increasing I was talking a lot at the beginning about increasing biodiversity, and some like permaculturists say, well, nothing was here originally when this was all just lava, so like how are you decreasing biodiversity by having weeds here? It's because you've probably all seen like complete strawberry guava forests with nothing else, so they kind of block out all other plants since they don't have natural predators like they do in their native area. So by having all these invasives here, the diversity in Hawaii is overall much lower, and things that it's turned to extinction or to be endangered. So I'm almost solely going to focus on invasives, which I do on all my foraging walks. I do very occasionally, if there's a very common native plant like pohinahina, which I make a yummy sage brown butter sauce out of. And you can also use it as a medicine since it is in the mint sage family. And uhaloa is another one of those quite common native plants that I don't feel bad about harvesting because there's so much of it. And so hopefully by taking out as many of these invasives as possible, we can make more room for the natives. If you want to get more into foraging, I was trying to brainstorm with my foraging friends over on Maui and Oahu. Does anyone do foraging tours on Big Island that you've heard of? No? You got to train someone in that.
Do you know David Leonard? He's on David Leonard on Maui. He's a
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's done it here, but he's on.
Oh, he's come over to do more about medicinal plants, right?
Right.
Yeah, I haven't met him, but I know a lot about his work. So if you want to do it yourself and maybe take up the mantle of leading Big Island foraging walks, I'll give you a bunch of resources to go further. This is my friend over on Maui, Sunny Savage's book, Wild Food Plants of Hawaii. It's the first foraging book specifically written for Hawaii since Ewell Gibbons briefly mentioned it in one of his books. That was probably like in the 60s or so. So at least, geez, what is that? 60 years since something has been written about foraging specifically in Hawaii. She has amazing recipes. I often use these two books in conjunction. John Hall's Trailside Plants of Hawaii book. He will mention edible uses for many of the plants, but he's not focused on that. But he does a great job at identification. If you haven't gotten his book. And it's really, even if you're not an expert botanist, it's divided really easily into different habitats and different plant types. So if you just know where you are and what kind of plant you're looking at, you only have like 5 or 10 photos to compare to. So it's pretty easy to identify stuff with his book. And then once you find it in his book, I often go to Sunny's book for recipes, because she's got great like cocktails and cordials and summer rolls and all kinds of fun things that she makes with this, and always coming up with new things. Then another foraging friend, Green Dean, just came out with this book in 2003 called Eat the Weeds. He's in Florida, and I think Central Florida, but that has enough overlap compared to most of the mainland foraging books with Hawaii. I think it's probably like 20 to 30% overlap, that you can use it pretty well here in Hawaii for many of the plants in there. And he has a great website that goes even more into depth over like, I think 300 different plants that are both edible and medicinal. And he has a great YouTube channel too, so he's well worth checking out. He makes all kinds of fun wines and vinegars and stuff. Then if you're in the frontier, the boundaries where it's not covered in any books, I often will use one of these plant ID apps to identify plants. And then I'll go to websites, and the ferns.info has turned out to be one of the best resources. I'll just search, once I know the species name, I'll search the species name and eat or edible. And more often than not, I'll get a hit on the ferns, which has both medicinal and edibility info for many of these plants with a list of references. So you can also go straight there. Does anyone have a favorite plant ID app that they use on their phone they've had success with? iNaturalist, yeah, that's my favorite. Huh? Picture this. You've had good luck with? It's kind of a hard problem because probably most of these were written, by Silicon Valley people. And even though California is one of the most diverse flora on the mainland, it's still only 5,000 species there compared to 14,000 here. So it's about a third of the number of species. So they just have a much larger flora here to narrow down with, and they're also not designed for tropics. Another issue that you might not think about is that leaves are boring in the tropics. I don't know how many of you have lived on the mainland and can think about like oak trees and sycamore and maples with all these really highly lobed and divided leaves that are very unique. Whereas most of the leaves in the tropics in Hawaii are just kind of boring leaf-shaped leaves, oval-shaped leaves. So if you only present most of these apps, or even a botanist with just a photo of a leaf, it's not going to do so well. So you can. I always tell people botanists are stupid. We need flowers or fruit to identify a plant. So the same is true with all these AI plant ID apps. Is that if you include a photo of the fruit on this canna or the flower on the halicoa, it'll do a much higher accuracy rate. So some of you may not have discovered that there's a built-in plant ID app on both iPhone and Android apps in the photo app. iNaturalist we already talked about, and it's I think more designed for kids is their sister app called Seeks. And the great thing on iNaturalist is there's a bunch of really good botanists on there too. So if you can't totally figure out what species it is on there, if you just submit it, usually within the next day someone will chime in with like, no, I think it's this species. Oh yeah, you got it right. I've seen that in that exact spot before. So you have people backing you up. PlantNet is about, I think it was rated as having better accuracy on the mainland, but here iNaturalist had better accuracy. But I just really don't like the interface on PlantNet. Its way of like inputting multiple photos is kind of clunky. So sometimes if iNaturalist can't decide what something is, I'll turn to PlantNet. And then there's also a picture of this, but I think you need a subscription for that, right? Yeah, so can ditch your subscription, use one of the other ones, they'll be much better. So if you haven't used any of these, I just want to quickly show you how you can use like the built-in iPhone app. If you just take a picture of a plant like this fern, and then you go into the Photos app, if you see stars next to the information tab, it thinks it knows what it is and it decided it's a plant. Got that part right, at least. And then you can go into that tab for more info, and it definitely got the species right on this, even though we don't have fruit on this, because ferns have their fruit hidden underneath the leaves. This is very far off. So take its first guess. But I find that the photo app on my iPhone, I don't have much experience with Google Lens, but I find it's maybe like 70% accurate. So not the best, but it's very easy to just like immediately look up a species on there. You can go in deeper for more info, but if I want more, I'll go to iNaturalist. And one of the many benefits, aside from the botanist on there, is you can submit multiple photos of a plant from different angles, or like the leaf and the flowers. So this will boost up the accuracy a lot. Then you say, what did you see? And I'll give you a list. So it nailed it on the first try here. This is Madre. But the other nice thing that I really like in iNaturalist is there's, if you want to find those particular species, you can go look up on here. I call it the Google Maps for plants. So this is not all the species, but a sampling of the species of plants, animal, and I think these are, the red is bugs maybe, or fungus, I can't remember. But say I want to find Madre, you can look it up on there. You can try the common name. Sometimes I find it works, sometimes I find it's totally off. Like once I was looking up elder flower and it gave me a rose species, which is, I don't know, anyone who calls rose elderflower. But in this case it got it right, because there's not really any plants I can think of that also have the name Madre except for Madre pilau. And then it will show you all the spots where it has been reported. This doesn't mean it's the only place.
They're all gone.
No, but the thing,
Before graduation.
the thing at least with iNaturalist is if it has a circle, it means its location has been obfuscated because it knows it's a rare or native plant. So I didn't know that at first. I was looking for the native smilax. And I found some supposedly in my neighborhood in Hawaii Kai. I didn't realize that circles, I saw like somewhere out in the ocean, like that does not grow out in the ocean. So I went to the spot where the circle was and I didn't see anything that looked like smilax there. And then someone else who's used it much more said, oh, that it's like obscured because it's a rare plant. So only this one could you go to and maybe find Madre there. That might be in someone's garden, so they decided not to.
That's the one that's all fenced in the big dog.
Yeah. So let me show you using it with a plant that I know is there and you can find. This is elderflower, which we don't have as much as you have here on Big Island, but this is one of my favorite antiviral plants. It's been shown in lab tests to work also against coronaviruses. Unless you have COVID. If you test positive, stop taking elderflower because it can exacerbate the cytokine storms that make COVID so bad. But it's a great preventative and also for common cold. So whenever I get on a plane, I take some dried elderflower with me and just ask for some hot water. So I feel like I'm keeping all the viruses that are locked up in that tin can with me at bay by having it on the spot. So taking all these antivirals, I've only gotten COVID once in the since it started, and I got over it in like 3 days by taking all these things on top of all. Yeah, exactly. So this is where it found elder on Tantalus on Oahu. I don't know why this one is obscured, because that's not a rare native plant at all. So you can actually go to those spots and find them and see them in situ. All right, now on to what you probably all came here for, the meat of the matter. What are the worst invasives here, and how can we put them to use? So I wanted to give you a top 10 of my favorite and probably the most invasive. These are not necessarily my favorite tasting, but just the ones that I see a lot of. And I'll go into depth with each of them a little more fully. So Halicoa is native to Mexico, where it's called guaje, and it was supposedly brought here as cattle fodder. They just didn't know that it had a hair loss compound in it called mimicine, which is called a depilatory. So it's mostly in the leaves, not so much in the pods or the flowers. And the cattle was mostly munching on the leaves, so they started to lose a lot of their hair if they're huh?
Bear tails.
Bear tails, you've seen it?
Oh,
Still
yeah,
to this
my
day?
horses used to get it on the
Horses,
way.
yeah.
Oh, they like it too?
Yeah.
And did they stick to the leaves, or were they eating the pods too? It's hard to tell.
I didn't watch them eat.
You didn't sit down to dinner with them? Say, eat that, not
I was
that.
60.
Okay. So luckily, it's much less in the pods and the flowers, which are the part that I like to eat. And you have to have more than 10% of your diet to cause any hair loss. So you guys have seen these seeds. It's hard to collect much substance or mass of these and have it be more than 10% of your diet. And I eat stuff made from this almost every day, including these howley capers, as Sonny, who invented them, has dubbed them, which I'll have out there for dinner if you want to taste them later. And I still have a good full head of hair. This is not a toupee. And another solace I take is that these are very popular in Mexico, where they're from. Almost any Mexican grocery store you go into, even in the States, will sell bundles of the guaje or halicoa pods to snack on. They have a much better, more plump variety. I don't know why we got the crappiest variety of halicoa that they brought over here. I think it controls your consumption of it, so you don't lose any hair. But last time I was in Mexico, everyone still had all their. I didn't see tons of bald people walking the street. And actually, there's an entire state named after guaje. So Oaxaca was originally Oaxaca, so that was the state of the guaje growers and eaters. Just the Spaniards couldn't pronounce that so well, so they redubbed it Oaxaca. And I was in Oaxaca, I was already 12 years ago, and everyone still had their hair there. So I take solace in that. And sometimes when I post about this on Instagram, I get a flurry of comments saying, how could you tell people to eat a poisonous plant? It causes abortions in India. They use it as abortifacient. I'm like, yeah, but they're eating the root, and we're not eating that at all. You're eating the seeds, and if you're going to tell everyone they should not eat any plant that it has any toxicity to them, you should have signs in all the supermarkets that say, don't eat the apples because the seed contains cyanide, and don't eat a whole bag of onions because if you do that, you would die. So it's all about quantity, right? Every food, if you ate too much of it, it would probably harm you or kill you. And the same is true with any medicine. There's a famous quote by, I'm spacing on the name. My PhD advisor would get very mad at me for who came up with this saying that the dose makes the medicine. So, does anyone remember who said that? Some great...
Wasn't that Schultes?
No, it was a Greek. Centuries, millennia before him.
Right. Schultes said it was a Greek, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, sorry, Discordes. That's it. Thank you. I need to take more. the Bacopa monerii. That's a good native plant that helps with your memory. So that's the use of a native plant. So these are all the potentially bad things about halikoa, but it is a legume, so one of the great sources of protein, and it's loaded with umami. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but often when I go into the forest, it smells like garlic edamame. I know that this plant is in full fruit because it has a garlic scent to it, in addition to the umami from the proteins in there. So you can kind of sniff it out as well. And I've made salsas and moles from the green seeds, which are my favorite thing to snack on. We couldn't reach the green pods on the highway driving here, but I brought some of the brown pods. Those are better cooked. And the fun thing is if you make a mole out of it, is technically a guacamole, so you can give it to your friends and telling you're giving them locally grown weedy guacamole. Like, oh, I love guacamole. I'm like, no, it's not guacamole, it's guacamole. And you can even use the younger, less plump seeds when you they're sort of more transparent. When you hold them up to the light, you don't see any seeds developed in them. I just toss them in oil and stick them in the microwave for like a minute, and they puff up, and I call them haole fries. They're really crunchy and yummy and also full of umami. So blow away all the truffle fries that the local fancy hotels are trying to serve. And all local and getting rid of invasive. From the mature pods, I often sit down with a 2-hour movie and try to seed these. It takes about 2 hours to get even like a pint of seeds. But then if you soak them overnight and then boil them in water for about an hour, you get a lot of the mimicine out, so it reduces the hair loss effect and still has a lot of the flavor. And then I make I'm dropping seeds on the ground. Hopefully no one will track them out. But then it makes a pretty good hummus, just with the rest of the ingredients being the same. I'm not going to eat these in this form, but if you do find green ones, they're pretty yummy to snack on, just on the side of the road. So you can take your part in eating this out of existence. Sorry? Is there a question? So that's hummus, and then my favorite is making haole capers out of this. I don't know about all of you, but I have a very high monthly caper budget. I have to get like the quart jars at Costco, and I go through those in probably under a month. So when Sunny introduced me to these, I was in love with them. And they even have the little handle built in, just like a caper. And if anyone's had a filthy martini where you use caper juice in it, so I call a martini you make out of these the filthy haole martini. So I'll have these out. Oh yeah, same thing as with the seeds. You want to soak them overnight and then boil them for about an hour. And I got to warn you, it smells like bean farts during that time, so you might want to evacuate the kitchen while you're boiling them, unless you want to blame someone else for the smell. And then I found that pickling them in a standard pickling solution, but dill, black pepper, and garlic are important to give it that caper taste, I found. But then they're a pretty good simulation of capers. And Sunny has dubbed this high-impact eating, because every flower you eat, you're getting rid of a whole bundle of future pods, which might be a couple hundred seeds, that will then beget a couple hundred trees, that will then beget thousands or tens of thousands of future seeds. So every single one of these capers you're eating, you're having a great impact on the future ecosystem and getting rid of this guy. Has anyone here eaten halikoa before? What did you think of it? Yeah. What part did you eat?
The seeds.
The green ones?
Yeah.
Nice.
So how do you eat the flowers? Do you pickle the flowers?
Yeah, that's for the capers.
Okay, so the flowers.
Yeah. You might be able to use the seeds for capers as well. They're just kind of tiny, the variety that we have here at least. Any other questions about halikoa before I go on to the next one? This you guys are all flinching at, but I consider this kahili ginger as a Hawaiian honeysuckle. I love pulling out the flowers of this and the white ginger too, and sucking on the nectar from the back. I've also taken to drying the stamens. It looks exactly like saffron. Doesn't have quite as much flavor as saffron, so I think maybe we could make a market in high-priced Hawaiian saffron from the stamens of these. And again, that's high-impact eating because you're getting rid of future seeds, although this travels or spreads more by the rhizomes. So the other thing you can do with the rhizome that Sunny came up with is make the pickled ginger, gari, that you have with sushi often. And it's a little more medicinal tasting than true ginger, but if you kind of mix it, maybe like 50-50 with regular ginger, it tastes pretty good. You can even make like a ginger powder out of the ground seeds of that. And it's also been found in lab studies to be effective cytotoxic against lung cancer cells, so from the rhizome. So there's some medicinal benefit to it as well. You can eat the seeds of it, almost all gingers. They have surprisingly a little bit of fruity taste, and cardamom also comes from a ginger relative, so I haven't experimented much yet with using the seeds because I don't see this on Oahu in fruit very often. So you guys will have to report back to me because you have much more of this on Big Island than we have on Oahu. Then Java plum is a native of South Asia and the Philippines, where it's called duhat in Philippines and jamun in India. This is in the guava family, which is many invasive plants. The fruit are super tasty, though a little bit astringent until you cook them. The only problem with them is they're often such high trees, you only see them smashed on the ground, ground in with a little tire rubber or dirt. So if you can find a short one, pick all the fruit and then cut the tree down. That would be your easiest access to Java plum. But it makes great jams or juices, and it's very popular in India, at least as an anti-diabetic. So I think that's been verified in the lab as well. So some ways to eat that out of existence. Probably up there with Halicoa is one of the most pernicious invasives is strawberry guava. Fruit is delicious, maybe too delicious. Some people have gotten too attached to it, like, oh, don't get rid of my beloved strawberry guava. It's never going to go away. Tell all those people, hopefully we can just get rid of a lot of it, because this, I find huge stands of, that's the only plant there. It probably has some allelopathy where compounds that wash off of the seed pod, off of the leaves, will kill other species, kind of like eucalyptus, which is in the same family. So in addition to the fruit, you can also use the leaves as an anti-diarrheal tea. This and regular guava and the lemon guava work really well for treating diarrhea. Almost too well sometimes if you really need to get something out. Like if you have food poisoning, I might skip this until you know. And have you guys seen the biocontrol scale show up on Big Island yet? It's starting to show up on Oahu a lot. I should have brought some infected leaves with me. So this is a scale, I think, from Brazil. They brought in and studied it for many years because we don't want it to affect all the native guava family like ohia and what's the other one I'm thinking of? So this was studied for years before they released it, and it's starting to pop up a lot on hikes that I do on Oahu, and I try to take an infected leaf from an infected tree and move it to another area where it hasn't been infected. If you do see it pop up, you can help with the spread of it. And since the bugs don't fly very well, I'll like cut a slit in the uninfected leaf and stick this infected leaf through it, so they're like in direct contact, and hopefully the bugs will spread from one to the other.
The same kind of exists in ohia. I see that all the time in the forest.
There's a myrtle rust.
Yeah, that's a fungus, I think. Yeah, and different from the rapid ohia death, which is also a fungus.
No, it's this kind of on the leaf.
Bubbly leaf.
There's some light right there.
I've seen that in wine. Avoid that flavor.
Wine-eye?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On Oahu?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have a wino over here, do you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got to be careful of duplicated placement. One of my ones that I've been fighting for years is Maili pilau, or stink vine, or as I call it, the kimchi plant. Because it, despite being in the coffee family, not in the brassicas related to cabbage at all, it totally smells like kimchi. I was looking for some in the garden here, but I didn't see any. I don't know if anyone brought any in with them for show and tell. But when I lived in a rainy area on Oahu, I'd have to pull out like 10 to 20 pounds of this a week from my garden. So when I found out you can eat the young leaves, they taste kind of like kimchi. They have a little bitter afternote, so it's only for like the super kimchi fans, and if you cook them down, it reduces that bitterness. And I'm still working with my collaborators in Thailand. They send me phytochemistry papers to translate into English or just edit their English for submission to other journals. And they sent me one, interestingly, on this being used as a herbal Viagra in Thailand. And they were the first ones to found traces of L-dopa compound in these, which is another type of stimulant. Even though it's in the coffee family, it doesn't have caffeine. But you might recognize that name if you've seen the movie or read the book Awakenings, where Oliver Sacks used L-dopa to treat Parkinson's patients. And it was found that it was something lacking in their brain that really helped them when they took that. So if you know anyone with Parkinson's, this plant might help with it too. So I tried to tell all the guys in my neighborhood there was free herbal Viagra in my backyard, and they could come harvest as much as they want. I wouldn't charge them a thing, and they could take it out, and I'd be rid of it, hopefully. Try to pull a little Tom Sawyer on them. You can also put this to use if you need to tie up trees and branches that are drooping. I found it makes it incredibly... Oh, this is the fruit of it, which you might see at a different stage. So I definitely try to get it before that, because those are only going to spread it more. But I found you could make pretty good baskets and rope out of this if you learn some basic cordage techniques of twining them together. I wove inch-thick rope out of it, and when I slung it over a beam, it could support my entire 175-pound weight. So can take advantage of the strength of these vines. So I made a basket. Well, I thought it was going to be a fruit basket, but then my girlfriend decided it was better as a foraging hat instead. I've also weaved trivets out of it, so trying to put the strength and flexibility of this to use as well. Then on to one of my favorite tasting weeds is Chinese violet, Acestasa gangetica. This is very versatile. It's in the shrimp plant family, Acanthaceae, which mostly ornamentals. There's not a ton of edible plants in this family. And I'm just coming to terms with it because in Peru, it was one of the families that confused me the most. Whenever I found something in this family, I could never figure out what it was until my advisor ID'd it for me. It's a sister family to the mints. So does anyone know anything special about mint stems? Exactly. So that's an easy way to identify this if you're not familiar with it, is you can just roll the stem under your in your fingers. You'll see that it has square stems. So it also has these beautiful white, purple, and lavender flowers, often on the same plant. So I haven't totally figured out if it's like an environmental thing or a sunlight thing that changes the flower color. The flowers are edible too and are really gorgeous in salads. And super neutral tasting, so if you need something where you need a lot of greens like saag paneer, this is really easy to harvest. You just run your hand up the stem and you can get rid of, you can harvest a bunch of leaves at once. And some people detect a little bit of pepperiness at the end. I have black pepper for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so I don't taste that. But some people might get a touch of spiciness to it. And in Africa, it's used traditionally, despite the name Chinese violet, I think it's pan-tropical, so it's used in Africa a lot. Did you see this when you were living in Africa?
I don't remember it there, but there's a lot of it around here.
Yeah, definitely. So it's used in Africa and been verified in the lab to work as an anti-asthmatic. And I was actually trying this and giving it to my cat who had asthma for a while. So seemed to work on her. This, oh, it's super low res. I didn't see that on my photo. This, but you, huh? This is one I'm working on. This is a work in progress. This is my Moby Dick. I vowed as my New Year's resolution to cut every one of these down that I could find. Because in my edible landscaping, yeah? Sure. In my edible landscaping business, I like to do the fun things. I do a lot of grafting and finding new fruit trees for people and helping them get rid of pests. But more often than not, I'm getting rid of invasive weeds. And this is one that pops up all the time. It's wind-borne seeds. So even if someone doesn't have a tree anywhere in their garden or even near their garden, it will blow into their garden. So you've got to get really good at identifying seedlings of this and getting, this is what it looks like when it's young. So learn to recognize it in this form when it's easy to take out and you don't need a stump puller or even like tricopier to poison it, because that's a lot of the work that I have to do is taking these out and killing them. This is in a kind of family that doesn't have many edibles in it, the Bignoniaceae or sausage tree family. So I'm still trying to research if this is edible. On the ferns, it's listed as edible, but it's also listed as being used in Africa as an animal killer or toxin. They put on poison darts, so I haven't taken the jump and tried it yet from the pods. But I got in touch with Oru, another classmate or colleague of ours who's from Benin, and asked him to ask all of his colleagues in West Africa if they've heard of this being eaten and how it's prepared, more importantly. Because a lot of getting rid of toxins in plants is about how you prepare it. Like cassava, you cannot eat raw. That would kill you with the cyanide in there. So maybe some like boiling or something gets rid of the toxin there. Do you have a question?
Turn it into charcoal.
Oh, yeah, that would be a good.
You eat charcoal as a, cure your gut, you turn it into charcoal.
Yeah, that's true. That would probably work for almost any plant. So if anyone tries this or knows of anyone who's tried it in West Africa, please let me know, because I'd like to get everyone eating the seed pods of this so we can get rid of it as soon as possible. Another fun one that I've been experimenting with recently is the sensitive plant. And those is really pernicious and annoying once you get past the initial fun part of the leaves wilting when you touch them because of its thorniness and its ability to spread. It is a good nitrogen fixer, at least, since it's a legume.
Quite a taproot.
Huh?
Quite a
Big taproot. So since it's another legume, also in the mimosoid tribe of that family, it also has mimicine, especially in the taproot and the leaves. So I've mostly been experimenting with using the flowers as an antidepressant and sleep aid. And I don't know if any of you have been bombarded with tons of videos about the people making the mimosa from the mainland, tea or tincture. I called it the 2024 was the mimosa tincture summer, because every time I went on YouTube, I was getting videos of that popping up. Maybe that's because of who I follow. None of you have seen that. But it is both this and the mimosa on the mainland, which is originally from Asia, are being used as antidepressants. And at least in this one, it's found to have 5-MeO-DMT. What you might recognize, the chemical DMT is the main psychedelic component of ayahuasca, the Amazonian psychedelic brew. But this form of DMT is more in what's in the frogs that people lick, or you shouldn't actually lick them because it's toxic bufotenine in there. You got to combust it first. So some people might try to make ayahuasca out of this as one way of getting rid of it if there's enough demand for that. It might be in Kona, I don't know. But it may be because of the DMT in there that it's used as a antidepressant as well as an anticonvulsant, antivenom, wound healer, probably because of its antimicrobial, antifungal, and antiviral activities. It's also, these are all found in lab tests as well on mice. Also found to have anti-hepatotoxic, so it'll save your liver if you're drinking too much Java plum wine, and as an aphrodisiac, maybe also because of the DMT in there. So I've been having good success with just taking a tincture of the flowers. Helps me fall asleep really well. Do you guys have this over here? Yeah. Sunny says she doesn't ever see it on Maui, lucky for her. This is ivy gourd, first one we've seen in the squash family, although bitter melon can be pretty invasive too. I find that because of my aversion to bitterness, I like this one much more. It has very neutral tasting leaves if you want to stir fry them. None of the bitterness of bitter melon. And you can also use mostly the red pods. The green pods still have a little bit of bitterness in them. But in India, they use it more for the fruit rather than the leaves, which are used in Southeast Asia, where I worked. And it's called tinli in India, I believe. And my friend on Oahu likes to make a tomato sauce out of the ripe fruits of that. Then one that's in the last one we're going to cover for today, in the presentation at least. I'll show you these other ones up front during dinner too. This is Christmas berry, willalike, or it's actually the same exact thing as the pink peppercorn that you might buy at, say, Whole Foods, but there it costs $300 a pound when it's in that multicolored pepper mix. And it's growing for free in our backyard, and we should be eating it out of existence. And I found that it's best to pick kind of underripe when there's a little bit of green, like this. If you let it get fully pink, it might be a little more flavorful. But I find there's often spider mites in there. So I'll try to pick it at this stage and then dry it and then put it in a sealed bottle so the bugs don't get to it. We've made Eat the Enemy chocolate out of this and Chiave smoked salt. So people could help eat all the weeds through delicious chocolate. It's a little bit polarizing. Not everybody loves the flavor of this. It's in the mango family, so it's not actually that spicy despite the pepper name. So the other things in that family are pistachios, cashews, V-apple, and most importantly, poison ivy and poison sumac. So if anyone has a mango allergy, you might want to skip this one, especially eating the leaves, which they do in Thailand, but I found them a little too astringent for me. Has anyone harvested this and eaten it before?
I'm really cheesy.
Tastes like pepper,
Yeah.
I met someone who made soda out of it, actually.
Oh, cool.
Italian soda.
How'd that taste?
I didn't try it, but they
Got
said
it.
they were harvesting.
Okay. Yeah, I have a friend who made beer from a bunch of this that I harvested for her. Does anyone know how not to become allergic to mangoes or pink peppercorn for the rest of your life?
No.
You always got to eat it with a spoon because the skin of mangoes has that same irritating erythritol oil that's in poison ivy and poison sumac and in cashew seed. So the mangoes are so delicious and so bountiful here in Hawaii. People are often tempted to like eat them straight out of the skin. And I meet a lot of people say, oh yeah, I grew up just like biting a hole in it and sucking it out. But that is kind of a sure way to get mango allergies. You might not get it at first, but after repeated exposure, kind of like poison ivy, you can get it. So I have a few friends who in their 30s and 40s developed mango allergies because they were scarfing on so many mango fruit straight out of the skin. And basically, you're rubbing poison ivy on your face if you do it that way. So always use a spoon if you want to enjoy mangoes for the rest of your life, which I'm a big advocate of. Is there any questions about this one? Okay. I'll skip talking about grafting. That's another subject. It's a fun way to save natives because I have these demo ones. Or how are we doing on time? Should we turn it over to questions and I can show these during dinner?
You can show your plants and then we'll do that dinner.
Okay. So we have immediate representation of Halicoa. I'm sure you all recognize that. Then on Tony and Louie's farm, I found this false cava, or hoja santa, or a cuyo, which I found when I used to live in Hilo, and there's a few farms that I'm working with. They're like, oh, we have this, you love kava, we have this amazing kava plant. I go over to their place, I'm like, oh, sorry to tell you, you do not have kava. You have a very invasive false kava. And you can tell, where's Ava on my shirt? There. So you can kind of tell the true Ava has sort of palmate veins on it, whereas this has what's called pinnate. There's like a central vein, and then they branch off the side of that. Kind of like a backbone, or ribs coming out from a backbone. So that's the difference. This is great for cooking, and it's used all across Latin America. In Peru, they have this amazing grilled fish dish called patarasca, where they wrap the fish in, I think it's a maranta or caladium leaf. Do you remember? Did you have that down there?
I don't think that maybe it's a different place.
Oh yeah, they might do it with different.
But I don't know.
Different
remember
meats.
that leaf in it. But this is good for green mole too.
Yes, exactly, for green mole.
Mexico.
And I love making an impromptu mole where I just grind up some cacao nibs with garlic and chilies, rub it on fish or meat, wrap it in this leaf, throw it on the grill, and it imparts this nice kind of a anisey flavor or smell. I'll pass that around if you want to take a look at that. If you do want to grow this, I'd recommend only keeping it in a pot, and have anyone else who asks for it, make them sign a contract that they will never let it leave a pot, and they'll make everyone they give it to also sign that same contract, because it spreads by rhizomes pretty easily. So it can take over, especially lowland areas, pretty quickly.
Does it have a, like a stamen, or how does it, like?
The flower?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a white inflorescence. Never seen it develop into fruits that look like, it's in the pepper family, like Ava, but I don't see it ever develop a kind of fruit that looks at all like pepper. But yeah, it does have these kind of like, they bend over at the top, kind of white. It looks like a callo or a calla lily inflorescence, but they're not related at all. Yeah, key ingredient in green mole for sure. Its Peruvian name is matico. That's I was trying to remember. So it's used all over Latin America. So if you do find it, use it in all your dishes. I'm sure you'll come to love it. Just don't love it too much. Another fun thing that I found is laukahi, or plantain. This is one of those confusing common names. There's three plants in three totally different families called plantain. There's the banana relative, there's this, and sycamore relative, or plane tree is also called plantain sometimes. This is good to eat if you can get through the fibers. It's a little bit fibrous, so you can kind of make kale chips out of it if you toss them in oil and spices and bake it in the oven. But even better, it is a great emollient. So if you have an insect bite, this is one thing that will treat it almost instantly. Or if you do get poison ivy or mango allergy, this will calm your skin. It's also good for yeast infections. And the seeds of this is psyllium husk, or what's used in Metamucil, the main component of Metamucil, as a laxative. So you have 2 or 3 types of medicine and at least one food. And I've seen people increasingly using psyllium husk in baking, especially in gluten-free baking as a replacement, because it's kind of mucilaginous and gooey as a replacement. Sorry?
Plantago? Is it genus Plantago?
Plantago, yes. And we do have a native Plantago or
Yeah.
two or maybe even more, but this is not the native one. And this you'll find often in driveways or lawns if they haven't been treated with Roundup. That's plantain or laukahi. Then just walking around the garden here, I found at least 1, 2, 3, 4 things to eat in the weeds. This is canna or Indian shot, which you probably recognize more from the seed pods. They're called Indian shot because they kind of have buckshot like seed. They're used to make jewelry fairly often. I saw in Peru they'd make necklaces out of those shot. They have beautiful red and yellow flowers, but they do seem to take off. In Colombia, where I believe they're native, it's called, remember the name? Achara, something like that. And instead of potato chips, often in your local grocery store, you'll find achara chips made from the starch of this. It's kind of like arrowroot starch. So I started making vegan bacon out of this because I had a very spreading one of these in my garden in Oahu. So I just harvest the rhizomes. Even though they look a lot like ginger, they're very distantly related and they're not spicy at all. So I'd wash it really well, scrub it, take off all these side roots, and then just get down to the rhizome. And then I'd mandolin it or slice it super thin, soak it in liquid smoke, maple syrup, soy sauce, black pepper, and chilies, and then bake it or roast it, and it tastes totally like if you ever made coconut bacon. I can't say, since I'm a pesca non-crustacean pastry insect vegan, I can't say how exactly it tastes like actual bacon, but it comes pretty close to all the other vegan bacons I've had. So I'll pass this part around. That's the more visible and recognizable part of that. Does anyone remember that? I recently learned this has a Hawaiian name. I guess it's been here long enough. It's something like Ali Ipoi. Do you know what that means?
So, in Hawaii, we have the introduced calabash plant from the Caribbean, which is also called lahania, and the seeds of the canna are put inside of that to make
Rattle.
juice and good and seed. So the two plants are both non-native, but have found the home here.
Got it.
Yeah, and they both are represented, the yellow and the red.
Right.
Canna angelus, so the tubers are edible.
Yeah. It's hidden in the scientific name. Sometimes you get clues from the scientific name. Anything with esculenta or edulis or is usually edible, or if you see officinalis, that's often a medicinal plant too. What are the other ones I found here? This is a little guy that was kind of hard to suss out. This is Oriental false hawksbeard. It's in the daisy family. It's the closest we have to dandelion here, although the yellow flower heads are not as big as dandelion that you might know from the mainland, and they're born much higher on inflorescent stalks. This tastes a lot like other members of the daisy family, like radicchio or endive. It's got a touch of bitterness, but not so much if you get it before it flowers. With any green, you want to get it before it actually flowers. So this is a great local substitute for lettuce, and it's not super invasive, but it was just one of the things I found right in the garden here. One of my favorite greens from the mainland was chickweed, which tastes exactly like sprouts. And that is an even better emollient than the laukahi, or plantain whenever I got a mosquito bite. When I was living in New York, I'd hunt for chickweed and rub it on my skin. It would make the itch go away instantly. This is tropical chickweed, which you can eat in a similar way. I don't think you want to eat as much as you would temperate chickweed, and it may be better cooked. It has some compound in it you don't want to have like tons and tons of. This is in, what family is this in? Caryophyllaceae, I think, is the same family as like, huh? Yeah, that's the genus. I think it, do you remember what family it's in? It is Caryophyllaceae, okay. So that's the family of like carnation, so not many edible plants in that family. Trimeria, or tropical chickweed. Maybe we can wash it and nuke it if you want to taste it afterwards.
I just want it gone.
Gone? All right. Well, you can help by eating it, making salads out of it. I don't find a ton of it on Oahu, so I haven't researched like how much is okay to eat. This is probably most people's most hated plant. This is nutgrass, which is actually a sedge. This is actually related to the plant that was originally used to make horchata, which is also a sedge that had tubers on it. Well, it still has tubers. It's not a species that's gone away, but before horchata was made with rice and almonds, it was made with what are called tiger nuts. They have another common name I'm spacing on right now. So I've been trying to figure out if we can make an invasive horchata out of the tubers of nutgrass, but I don't often find it with many tubers on it. So there's not a whole lot of substance there to work with, but I'll keep working on that one because that's a pretty nasty one. Everyone, I assume, recognizes that one from their garden, unfortunately. All right, that's the meat of the foraging stuff. So if you want, I post pretty regularly on Instagram and Facebook under Natty by Nature 808. I don't know if any of you are the right age to get that reference. I regularly post about foraging, growing fruits, gardening, medicinal plants, native plants, and all fun stuff about botany. And you can also follow my Madre chocolate account and can get our chocolate, I think, locally at Island Naturals. We gotta call them and ask them to restock because they haven't ordered in a bit. But I brought some tonight if you want to taste them. And all right, any questions about these, or you just want to dive in and eat some of these with dinner? Yeah.